The year was 2347, and Earth had been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years. Humans had worked hard to earn their place among the stars. They had given soldiers, ships, and new technology to the Alliance. They believed they were building something good. They believed they were safe. Admiral Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Resolute, looking out at the stars. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the United Earth Navy for 30 years. Now he commanded humanity's entire fleet of 12 vessels stationed near the outer colonies. It was not a large fleet, but it was enough to protect Earth's interests in the galaxy. Far away, on a space station orbiting a planet called Vega Prime, Ambassador Catherine Price was finishing another long day of meetings. She was humanity's voice on the Galactic Council. For 10 years, she had worked to build friendships with the alien delegates. She had learned their languages, their customs, and their politics. She believed in the promise of unity. She believed that different species could work together for peace. The council was made up of 7 elder species. The Vailori were tall and thin, with silver skin. They saw themselves as the leaders of the galaxy. The Kethrani were small beings covered in soft fur, known for their science and medicine. The Zorvax had 4 arms and hard shells, and they were fierce warriors. The Helix Collective was a group mind, many bodies sharing one thought. The Mindari were ancient beings who rarely spoke but always watched. The Thrin were traders who valued profit above all else. And the Orathi were a proud people who lived on ocean worlds. For 50 years, these species had welcomed humanity into their alliance. They had promised protection. They had promised friendship. But promises, as Catherine would soon learn, could be lies. Counselor Varric of the Vailori did not like humans. He had watched them for decades, and he was afraid. Humans were different from other species. They had children fast. They learned fast. They changed fast. In just 50 years, human scientists had created new weapons and new ships that surprised even the oldest species. Varric saw this and felt fear in his heart. He began to speak with the other counselors in secret. He told them that humans were dangerous. He showed them numbers and charts. He said that if humans kept growing, they would soon be stronger than all other species combined. He said that humans would take over the galaxy. He said they had to act now, before it was too late. Some counselors did not believe him. The Kethrani delegate, a gentle scientist named Salos, argued that humans had done nothing wrong. But Varric was clever. He created false evidence. He made it look like humans were building secret weapons. He made it look like Earth's leaders were planning to attack the Council. One by one, the other species began to believe his lies. In a secret meeting, hidden from all records, the Council voted. The decision was made. Humanity would be destroyed. Catherine knew nothing of this vote. She continued her work, meeting with delegates and writing reports, but she was smart and she noticed small things. Counselors who once smiled at her now looked away. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Messages that should have reached her never arrived. One night, she stayed late in her office, working on trade agreements. Her computer showed a strange file, something that had arrived by mistake. It was a fragment of an encrypted message. She should not have been able to see it, but the encryption was weak, and Catherine had learned some skills during her years in diplomacy. She worked for hours, breaking the code piece by piece. When she finally read the message, her blood turned cold. It spoke of a military operation. It spoke of ships gathering in secret. It spoke of Earth. Catherine jumped from her chair. She had to warn someone. She had to contact Admiral Carter. She had to tell Earth what was coming. She ran to the communications center, but the doors would not open. Her access codes had been canceled. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Council security officers appeared in the hallway, their weapons raised. A Vailori commander stepped forward with a cold smile on his silver face. "Ambassador Price," he said. You are under arrest for crimes against the Galactic Council. You are charged with espionage and conspiracy against member species." "These charges are lies," Catherine said. "I have done nothing wrong." "That is not for you to decide," the commander replied. "You will come with us." They took her to a cell deep inside the station. The walls were thick, and no signals could pass through them. She was alone, cut off from everyone she knew. She sat in the darkness and thought about Earth, about her family, about the billions of people who had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, Admiral Carter received a strange order from the Council. He was told to bring his fleet to a new position, away from Earth. The reason given was a training exercise. Carter was a careful man. Something about the order felt wrong, but he was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. As his ships moved to their new position, Carter looked back at the blue dot that was Earth. He felt an odd feeling in his chest, like he was seeing his home for the last time. He pushed the feeling away and focused on his duty. Across the galaxy, Council warships were gathering. 400 vessels from 7 species, all moving toward one target. Their commanders had been told that they were stopping a dangerous enemy. They had been told that they were saving the galaxy. They did not know they were about to commit the greatest crime in galactic history. In her dark cell, Catherine heard distant alarms. Something was happening. She pressed her hands against the cold wall and whispered a prayer for her people. She did not know if anyone would hear. She did not know if anyone would survive what was coming. The false alliance was about to show its true face, and humanity, trusting and hopeful, was about to learn that the galaxy was not the friendly place they had believed it to be. The sky above Earth was quiet and peaceful on that Tuesday morning. Children walked to school, people went to work, families made plans for the weekend. No one knew that death was coming from the stars. Admiral Daniel Carter was on his bridge when the first alarm sounded. His sensors showed something impossible. Hundreds of ships were appearing from hyperspace, right at the edge of Earth's solar system. He counted them with growing horror. 100, 200, 300, 400 warships, all bearing council markings. "This must be a mistake," his first officer said. "The council is our ally." Carter did not answer. Deep in his gut, he knew this was no mistake. He opened a channel to the lead vessel and demanded to know what was happening. The face of Counselor Varric appeared on his screen. The Vylori's silver skin gleamed under cold lights. His eyes held no warmth, no friendship, only the look of a hunter watching his prey. "Admiral Carter," Varric said, "the Galactic Council has found humanity guilty of crimes against the Galactic Order. You have been building weapons of mass destruction. You have been planning attacks against peaceful species. The sentence is immediate termination." "Those are lies," Carter shouted. "We have done nothing wrong. We have been loyal members of the Council for 50 years. "Your guilt has been proven," Varric replied. "This conversation is over." The screen went dark. A moment later, the Council fleet began to move toward Earth. Carter looked at his 12 ships, 12 against 400. There was no hope of victory. But there was also no thought of running. These were Earth's defenders, and they would die defending their home. "All ships," Carter said into his communicator. "This is Admiral Carter. The Council has betrayed us. They are coming to destroy our world. We cannot win this battle, but we can buy time. We can give our people a chance to hide, to survive. Today we fight not for victory, but for hope. It has been an honor to serve with you all." The 12 human ships turned toward the enemy fleet. They were small and few, but they moved with purpose. Their crews knew they were going to die. They did not run. They did not beg. They prepared their weapons and flew straight at the wall of enemy vessels. The battle was short and brutal. Human ships darted between the larger Council cruisers, firing everything they had. They destroyed 17 enemy vessels before the numbers became too great. One by one, The human ships exploded in balls of fire. On Earth, people watched the sky with confusion and fear. Points of light flickered in the darkness of space. Then the first bombs began to fall. The Council claimed they were targeting military bases. This was another lie. Their weapons fell on cities, on hospitals, on schools. In New York, a tower that had stood for centuries crumbled to dust. In Paris, the river turned red. In Tokyo, fires burned for days. Across every continent, the story was the same. Death fell from the sky, and there was nowhere to hide. Commander Nicole Harris was stationed at a military base in Colorado when the attack began. She was a young officer, only 32 years old, with short brown hair and sharp eyes. When the first explosions hit, she did not freeze. She grabbed her communicator and began giving orders. "Everyone who can move, follow me," she shouted. "We are going underground. There are bunkers in the mountains. That is our only chance." She led hundreds of soldiers and civilians through burning streets and collapsing buildings. Above them, council ships filled the sky like angry insects. Energy beams cut through the air, turning everything they touched to ash. Harris kept moving, kept shouting, kept pulling people forward. They reached the bunker entrance just as another wave of bombs fell. The heavy doors closed behind them, and the world above became a distant thunder. Inside the bunker, people cried and prayed and held each other. Harris stood among them, already thinking about what came next. In space, Admiral Carter's flagship was the last human vessel still fighting. The Resolute was burning, its hull torn open in a dozen places. Half the crew was dead, the other half was dying. But the ship kept firing, kept fighting, kept refusing to surrender. Carter sat in his command chair, blood running down his face from a wound on his forehead. His hands moved across the controls, directing what little power remained into weapons. Around him, his bridge crew worked in silence, each person focused on their final duty. "Sir," a young officer said, "I am detecting a deep space signal. Our outer colonies are receiving our transmissions." Carter nodded. He had been broadcasting since the battle began. Everything that happened here would be recorded. The colonies would know. The survivors would remember. He opened one final channel, sending his voice into the void. "This is Admiral Daniel Carter of the United Earth Navy. Earth has been attacked by the Galactic Council. Our planet is burning. Our fleet is destroyed. But humanity is not dead. To all who hear this message, remember what they did to us. Remember, and one day, make them pay." The Resolute exploded moments later. Admiral Carter died with his ship, his last words traveling at the speed of light toward the distant colonies. On the station at Vega Prime, Catherine Price heard the news through the walls of her cell. Guards were talking in the hallway, celebrating their victory. 6 billion humans were dead. Earth was a burning ruin. The threat had been eliminated. Catherine fell to her knees and wept. Her world, her people, everything she had known was gone. For hours, she stayed on the cold floor, lost in grief. Then a sound made her look up. Her cell door was opening. A small, furry figure stepped inside. It was Salos, the Kathrani scientist who had argued against the attack. "I am sorry," Salos said quietly. "I tried to stop this. I failed." "Why are you here?" Catherine asked. "Because I cannot live with what my people have done," Salos replied. "I have stolen a shuttle. I have codes that will let us pass through the security grid. I am helping you escape." Catherine stood slowly. Her tears dried on her face. Her grief turned into something harder, something colder. "Where will we go?" she asked. "I have heard rumors," Salos said. "Whispers of human ships hiding beyond the known systems. If your people have survived somewhere, I will help you find them." Catherine looked back at her empty cell. She had entered it as an ambassador of peace. She left it as something else entirely. She did not know what the future held, But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was not the end. This was the beginning. Beyond the edge of the solar system, past the frozen rocks of the Kuiper Belt, a fleet of ships floated in perfect darkness. No lights showed on their hulls. No signals left their communication arrays. To anyone watching, they would have looked like nothing more than dead metal drifting through empty space. General Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the carrier Vengeance, watching the distant light of the sun. From this far away, it was just another star. But he knew what was happening near that star. He had listened to every transmission, every desperate call for help, every death cry from the battle. He had watched Earth burn, and he had done nothing. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, "the last transmissions from Admiral Carter have stopped. The Resolute is gone." Webb closed his eyes. Daniel Carter had been his friend for 20 years. They had trained together, served together, dreamed together about humanity's future among the stars. Now Daniel was dead, along with billions of others. "Maintain radio silence," Webb ordered. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "No one moves. No one speaks. We are ghosts." The officers on the bridge looked at him with pain in their eyes. They wanted to fight. They wanted to rush toward Earth and die defending their home. But Webb knew that would be foolish. 12 ships had stood against 400 and failed. His hidden fleet of 50 vessels would face the same fate. General Webb was not a coward. He was a planner. 20 years ago, when humanity first made contact with alien life, a secret group within Earth's government had gathered to discuss the worst possible futures. They called themselves the Contingency Commission. They asked one simple question: what if the aliens turned against them? The answer was this hidden fleet. Ships built in secret, crewed by volunteers who told no one where they were going. Weapons stockpiled on distant asteroids. Plans made for the darkest day. That day had come. For 3 weeks, the fleet stayed hidden. Webb sent tiny spy drones toward Earth, carefully disguised as space debris. What they showed him was worse than he had feared. The Council had claimed Earth as their prize. Their ships orbited the burned planet, picking through the wreckage. They took resources, technology, anything of value. They treated humanity's graveyard like a shopping center. Then, on the 22nd day, a small shuttle appeared at the edge of Webb's sensor range. It was sending a coded signal, a frequency that only a handful of people knew. Webb felt hope for the first time since the attack. The shuttle carried 2 passengers. One was Ambassador Catherine Price, thin and exhausted but alive. The other was a small Kethrani scientist named Selos. When Catherine stepped onto the Vengeance, she carried a data chip in her trembling hand. "Proof," she said, giving the chip to Webb. "Proof that they planned this from the beginning. Proof that our guilt was manufactured. Proof that we were murdered for the crime of being human." Webb looked at the data. Messages between counselors, secret meetings, votes taken in hidden chambers. The evidence was complete. The Council had decided to kill humanity not because of anything humans had done, but because of what humans might become. "They were afraid of us," Webb said quietly. "They were afraid of our potential," Catherine replied. "Now we must show them that their fear was justified." Over the following months, survivors began to find each other. Human colonies across 20 star systems went dark, dismantling their communication systems and hiding from Council patrols. Refugees gathered on barren moons and in asteroid fields. They brought whatever they could carry: tools, weapons, knowledge, hope. On Earth, Commander Nicole Harris led her group out of the bunkers after the Council ships finally left. 3 million people had survived by hiding underground. The surface was a wasteland of ash and ruins, but Harris refused to give up. She found working communication equipment in an old military base and sent a message into space. "This is Commander Nicole Harris calling any human vessel. We are survivors on Earth. We are 3 million strong. We will not die quietly." Her message traveled through the void for weeks before it reached the Vengeance. When Webb heard her voice, he felt something he had not felt in months. He felt the stirring of a plan. He brought Catherine, his senior officers, and key scientists into a meeting room. On the table before them was a map of the galaxy, marked with every known council base, trade route, and military installation. "We cannot win a war today," Webb said. "We do not have enough ships, enough soldiers, or enough resources. The Council controls thousands of systems. We control nothing." "Then what do we do?" one officer asked. Webb looked around the room with fire in his eyes. "We build. We hide. We prepare. The Council thinks we are finished. They will return to their comfortable lives and forget about us. They will grow soft and lazy. And while they sleep, we will create the largest fleet the galaxy has ever seen." "How long will this take?" Catherine asked. 20 years, Webb replied. "Maybe more. We will find hidden places to build shipyards. We will steal technology from Council convoys. We will train every man, woman, and child who survives to be a soldier, a pilot, or an engineer. We will turn our grief into weapons." Catherine nodded slowly. "And when we are ready?" "When we are ready," Webb said, "we will give them a war they cannot imagine. We will burn everything they have built. We will make them feel what we felt, and we will show the entire galaxy that humanity does not die easily." He looked at each person in the room. "This will not be quick. This will not be easy. Many of us will not live to see the end, but our children will. Our grandchildren will. They will grow up in a galaxy that fears human strength, not human weakness." He placed his hand on the table. "I call this Operation Rebirth. Who stands with me?" Every hand in the room rose. On Earth, Nicole Harris received Webb's reply. Help was coming, not today, not tomorrow, but someday. She gathered her 3 million survivors and told them the truth. The war was not over. It was just beginning. In hidden corners of space, humans started to build. They worked in darkness, in silence, in secret. They built ships and trained soldiers. They studied Council technology and made it better. They raised their children on stories of the betrayal, teaching them to remember, to prepare, to wait. 20 years of silence. 20 years of pain. 20 years of building something that would shake the stars. The Council had killed Earth, but they had not killed humanity. And humanity, as the galaxy would soon learn, had a very long memory. 20 years passed like a slow-burning fire. In the halls of the Galactic Council, the species who had destroyed Earth celebrated their victory. Councillor Varric received medals and honors. He was called the savior of the galaxy, the leader who had stopped a dangerous threat before it could grow. Statues were built in his image. Songs were written about his wisdom. The Council divided Earth's former colonies among themselves. The Violori took the richest worlds. The Zorvax claimed the mining asteroids. The Thrin merchants stripped every piece of human technology they could find and sold it at great profit. They fought among themselves over the scraps of a dead civilization. Years passed and the Council grew comfortable. Their military shrank because there were no enemies left to fight. Their ships grew old because there was no need for new ones. Their soldiers grew lazy because there was no war to prepare for. The 7 species returned to their peaceful lives and slowly forgot about the people they had murdered. But in the darkness of deep space, humanity remembered. Captain Derek Shaw stood on the bridge of the carrier Retribution and watched his crew run combat drills. He was 40 years old, with broad shoulders and a scar across his chin from an accident during training. He had been 20 when Earth fell. His parents, his sisters, his childhood friends had all died in the attack. He had spent every day since preparing for revenge. The Retribution was the first ship of its class, a massive carrier designed by human engineers using stolen Council technology. It was faster than any Valori cruiser. Its weapons were stronger than anything the Zorvax had built. Its armor could withstand hits that would destroy 3 Council vessels, and it was just one of 2,000 ships. General Marcus Webb, now 73 years old, oversaw the fleet from his command station hidden in a nebula. His hair had turned white, and his body had grown weak, but his mind was still sharp. He had spent 20 years building this force, and he would live long enough to see it used. Catherine Price had become the political leader of the human resurgence. She traveled between hidden colonies, speaking to survivors and their children. She reminded them why they were fighting. She told them stories of the old Earth, of its blue oceans and green forests, of its cities full of music and laughter. She made sure no one forgot what had been taken from them. Under her leadership, the scattered survivors had become a unified government. They had laws and courts and councils. They had schools where children learned history and science. They had factories where workers built the weapons of war. They had hospitals where doctors healed the sick. They had built a civilization in hiding, waiting for the day they would step into the light. Admiral Christopher Grant was one of the young officers who had grown up in this hidden world. He had been only 8 years old when Earth fell. His earliest memory was the sound of his mother crying when she heard the news. Now he commanded a fleet of 300 attack ships, trained to strike fast and disappear before the enemy could respond. He was one of thousands of officers who had never known peace. They had been raised for war. They had practiced combat simulations since childhood. They had memorized every Council ship design, every weakness, every vulnerability. They were not soldiers fighting for a cause. They were weapons forged in grief. On the 20th anniversary of the betrayal, Catherine Price called a gathering. Every ship that could be spared sent representatives to a meeting point in empty space. Over 1 million humans gathered to remember and to prepare. Catherine stood before them on a floating platform, her image broadcast to every screen in the fleet. She was older now, her hair gray and her face lined with years of struggle, but her voice was strong. 20 years ago, she began, the Galactic Council came to our home and murdered our people. They killed our families. They burned our cities. They destroyed our world. They thought they had ended us. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. They were wrong. A murmur ran through the crowd. We have spent 20 years in darkness. We have lived in caves and on frozen moons. We have eaten scraps and worn rags. We have buried our dead and raised our children in secret. And through all of it, we have never stopped preparing for this day. She raised her hand, and behind her the lights of 2,000 warships became visible, emerging from the darkness like stars being born. This is our fleet. This is our answer. This is our justice. The crowd erupted in cheers. People wept and embraced each other. Old men who had survived the attack fell to their knees, thanking God that they had lived to see this moment. Children who had only heard stories of Earth watched with wide eyes, finally understanding what their parents had been working toward. Catherine waited for silence, then spoke again. I want to read some names. These are people I knew, people I loved, people who died because the Council was afraid of what we might become. She read for an hour. Names of friends, colleagues, family members. Names of teachers and doctors and artists. Names of children who never grew up. Each name was a wound, and each wound was a reason to fight. When she finished, her face was wet with tears. She looked directly into the cameras, knowing that her words would be recorded and remembered for generations. Tomorrow, we leave this place. We fly toward the heart of Council space. We bring fire and judgment, not because we want war, but because war was brought to us, not because we want revenge, but because justice demands it, not because we hate, but because we loved so much that we cannot let that love be forgotten." She took a deep breath. "General Webb, the fleet is yours." Webb stepped forward, old and tired but unbowed. He looked at the gathered humans, at the ships they had built, at the children they had raised, at the civilization they had saved from extinction. "All ships," he said, "set course for Vega Prime. It is time to remind the Council that humanity is still alive." The fleet began to move. 2,000 vessels turning as one, their engines lighting the darkness like a new constellation. They were not running anymore. They were not hiding anymore. They were coming. The council was holding its annual assembly when the alarms began to scream. Councillor Varek sat in his golden chair, surrounded by delegates from 7 species. They had been discussing trade agreements and border disputes, the boring business of running a galaxy at peace. 20 years of comfort had made them soft. 20 years of safety had made them careless. A young Valary officer ran into the chamber, his silver face pale with fear. "Ships," he gasped. "Thousands of ships. They just appeared from hyperspace." Varek stood slowly. "What kind of ships? Who are they?" The officer looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, they are human." The chamber fell silent. Every delegate stared at the officer, as if he had spoken in a language they did not understand. Human ships were impossible. Humanity was dead. They had made sure of it. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Derek Shaw watched the council station grow larger on his screen. It was a massive structure, a ring of metal and glass floating in space, home to millions of aliens who had celebrated the death of his people. He felt no joy at seeing it. He felt only cold determination. Admiral Christopher Grant commanded the assault from his flagship, the Horizon. He had studied council defenses for 20 years. He knew every weakness, every gap in their patrol patterns, every flaw in their shield systems. His battle plan was precise and merciless. "All wings," Grant said calmly. "Begin attack formation. Primary targets are the defense platforms. Secondary targets are enemy capital ships. Do not fire on civilian vessels unless they fire first. We are here for justice, not slaughter." The human fleet spread across space like a wave of steel. 2,000 ships against the few hundred the Council could gather on short notice. For 20 years, the Council had allowed their military to weaken. Now they would pay for that mistake. The first shots came from the defense platforms around the station. Energy beams lanced through space, striking human fighters and destroyers. Ships exploded, pilots died, but the fleet kept coming, absorbing the losses and pushing forward. Captain Shaw led his carrier group through the defensive line, his fighters swarming around him like angry insects. They targeted the weapon systems on the platforms, destroying them one by one. Behind him, heavy cruisers moved into position, their massive guns trained on the enemy capital ships. The Zorvacs were the first to counterattack. Their warrior caste had always been proud, and they refused to run from a fight. 50 of their battleships charged toward the human formation, firing everything they had. Admiral Grant had expected this. He let them come, drawing them away from the station. When the Zorvacs were fully committed, he sprang his trap. Hidden destroyers appeared behind the enemy formation, cutting off their retreat. The battle lasted only 15 minutes. When it was over, all 50 Zorvacs battleships were debris. Inside the council station, panic was spreading. Councillor Varek screamed orders at his officers, demanding they send for reinforcements. But the nearest fleet was days away. There was no one coming to help. Catherine Price sat in a quiet room on the Retribution, watching the battle on a screen. Selos, the Kathrani scientist who had saved her life 20 years ago, sat beside her. They did not speak. There was nothing to say. When the defensive line finally collapsed, Catherine stood and walked to the communication center. It was time. She opened a channel to every frequency, broadcasting to the council station, to the remaining enemy ships, to every corner of the galaxy that could receive her signal. This is Catherine Price, speaking for the human resurgence. 20 years ago, you murdered our world. You killed 6 billion of our people. You thought you had ended us. You celebrated your victory and returned to your comfortable lives. She paused, letting her words sink in. We did not die. We hid in the darkness and built our strength. We raised our children on stories of what you did to us. We taught them to remember. We taught them to wait. And now, we have come to deliver judgment. On the station, Counselor Varek listened with horror. He had been so certain that the threat was eliminated. He had been so sure of his victory. You killed us because you were afraid of what we might become, Catherine continued. Now you will see that your fear was not great enough. We are humanity. We do not forget. We do not forgive. And we do not surrender. She closed the channel. General Webb gave the final order from his command ship. His voice was old and weak, but every word carried weight. All ships, destroy the station. Leave nothing standing. Captain Shaw's retribution led the assault. Its massive guns fired again and again, tearing through the station's shields. Other ships joined in, pouring fire onto the structure that had been the heart of Council power. Inside, aliens ran through corridors and scrambled for escape pods. Some made it out. Many did not. The station broke apart piece by piece, metal and glass scattering into the void. When it finally exploded, the light was visible across the system. The surviving Council ships tried to flee. Human hunters chased them down one by one. By the end of the day, not a single enemy vessel remained. In the wreckage, search teams found the escape pod carrying Counselor Varek. He was brought before Catherine Price in chains. The alien who had ordered the death of Earth knelt before the human woman he had tried to destroy. "What will you do with me?" Varek asked, his silver skin dull with fear. Catherine looked at him for a long moment. "You will stand trial. You will be judged by the survivors of the people you murdered, and then you will face whatever punishment they decide." She turned away from him, dismissing him from her sight. In the weeks that followed, humanity did not conquer the galaxy. They did not enslave the species who had attacked them. They did not burn planets or murder civilians. They were not like the Council. Instead, they delivered a message. Human ships appeared over every Council world, not to attack, but to speak. The message was the same everywhere. We are humanity. We have returned. We do not want war, but we will not accept peace at the cost of our survival. From this day forward, any species that threatens human life will face the same fate as the Council. Remember this. Remember us. And remember that we are watching. The galaxy learned a new emotion that day. They learned to fear. On Earth, Commander Nicole Harris led the remaining survivors out of their bunkers for the last time. Human ships had arrived to begin the work of rebuilding. Trees would be planted. Cities would rise again. Children would play in sunlight that their parents had never seen. General Marcus Webb died 3 months after the battle, his body finally giving out. He was buried in space, his coffin launched toward the sun that had warmed the home he had spent his life protecting. Catherine Price spoke at his funeral, promising that his sacrifice would never be forgotten. Captain Derek Shaw was promoted to admiral. He spent the rest of his life training the next generation of human officers, teaching them that strength must always be paired with wisdom, and that revenge without justice is just another form of cruelty. And in the rebuilt cities of Earth, children grew up hearing the stories. They learned about the betrayal and the long darkness. They learned about the survivors who refused to give up. They learned about the day humanity returned to claim its place among the stars. The galaxy would never forget what happened. Neither would humanity. Some lessons are written in fire, some memories last forever, and some species, no matter how hard you try to destroy them, simply refuse to die. Humanity endures.